Hi, my name is Sam, and welcome to the second of our reflections for Azalea during this time of COVID-19 crisis. Today is Maundy Thursday, and I've been reading the account of Jesus in Gethsemane, and I wanted to read a bit of that to you. They went to the place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." I'm sure many of us can relate to Jesus and the disciples in this story. Jesus admits to be distressed and troubled. He says his soul is overwhelmed with sorrow. And that might be your experience right now. You may have troubles in your own life, or you may be reading the news or aware of friends and family. And many of us are experiencing fear and anxiety and even sorrow. And just notice the way that Jesus doesn't minimize those feelings in his own heart. He doesn't push them to one side. He doesn't try and, keep a smile and just carry on. He brings those things to God in prayer. And his prayer has 3 parts, doesn't it? First, he says, Abba, Father, that word that means kind of like daddy. It's just such a personal, intimate thing. It's loaded with so much trust and love and relationship. And he says, everything is possible for you. But then he says the second thing, take this cup from me. Or on some occasions it reads, if it's possible, take this cup from me. He doesn't want to go through what he's going to go through on one level. He fears it. He knows it's going to be terrible. But then there's the third part, isn't there? Yet not what I will, but what you will. Ultimately, he trusts his troubles up to God, and he yields these things to God. And I wonder if that is important for you, to come to God in prayer during these times, to remind yourself that he is your perfect parent, to remind yourself that everything is possible for God, but also just to be honest. If there are things that are on your heart, if there are feelings, if there are things you want, you can say them to God. It's okay. And then that final part of prayer, that yielding, that just saying, and yet not what I will, but your will. Now it's interesting, isn't it, that we have this second part of the story where Jesus goes and finds the disciples sleeping. And I sometimes feel a bit sorry for the disciples because, sometimes we're tired, aren't we? If you're feeling tired right now, maybe, you're some of us are busier than ever, aren't we? We're just so much stuff to try and respond to during this time. And maybe you're tired. That's okay. Or some of us, we're tired because we're not doing so much. We're maybe stuck in the house, or maybe, we don't have the adrenaline of daily, interactivity, going up to work, those sorts of things. Some of us are getting tired because we're doing less stuff. But I don't think Jesus is telling the disciples off for being sleepy. I don't think he's telling you off for being sleepy. And honestly, during this time, if you need to sleep a bit more, if you need to take an afternoon nap, go to bed earlier, whatever it is, don't feel bad about that. And I was reading about this in Conrad Gempf's book, Mealtime Habits of the Messiah, and he points out that the problem with the disciples is less about just being tired and sleepy. Apparently in Luke's Gospel, it says that they were exhausted from sorrow. So these guys aren't just naturally tired. They're tired because of how much deep sorrow they're feeling. They're sensing that Jesus is going to go to his death, and they're overwhelmed by it. I don't think that in these times the temptation is for you to sleep too much or rest too much. I think the sin is that we try and distract ourselves, that we just binge on box sets, or we get lost in the news, or we just try and deny the problems that are around us, kind of push them down. And actually, we see in Jesus the example of bringing them to God and being honest with them, with God. And I think that's what Jesus is asking the disciples to do as well. He's saying that they should be real, they should be honest, and bring those problems to God in prayer. Comrade Gemp finishes his chapter on this saying, faith does not shelve the questions or hide objections to the way things are. Faith is about wrestling with those questions and objections. Faith is not stopping short of the questions and the despair. Faith is about moving past them, as Jesus did in his prayer in the garden. Everything turns upon this attitude of Jesus in Gethsemane and the way that he acts on it. So my encouragement for you today is, however you're feeling, to bring that to God in prayer, to acknowledge who he is, to be honest about how you feel, your worries, your concerns, your fears, and then if you can, to allow him to let you yield those things to him as Jesus did. And I've put a video on the same page that I'm about to post this on. It's called When My Soul Is Weak. It's by my friend Joel, and it's about that experience of being in the garden and wanting to be with Jesus and pray with Jesus. So as you come away from this reflection, you may want to watch that video and just engage with that song and give over how you feel to God. Let's keep praying. Let's keep seeking God. Let's keep being real. And let's believe that God has the best for us.